My name is Sarah. I'm 29, and at my housewarming party in Denver, my best friend announced she was engaged to my boyfriend with the ring I helped him pick out. Before I tell you how one photograph and a PowerPoint presentation destroyed their perfect fairy tale and exposed a conspiracy that went deeper than I ever imagined, let me know in the comments what the worst betrayal you've ever experienced was. This story gets wild, and I promise you, won't see the ending coming. They thought they had orchestrated the perfect crime. Standing there in the middle of my new living room in the Highlands neighborhood, surrounded by all our mutual friends, colleagues from work, and my family who had flown in from Montana for the occasion, my best friend since college, Rachel Morrison, was practically glowing as she showed off the vintage emerald ring on her finger. The same ring I had spent 3 weekends helping my boyfriend David Chen pick out at different jewelry stores across Denver. My boyfriend of 3.5 years, the man I thought I was going to marry, had his arm wrapped around her waist like they'd been together forever instead of conducting their affair behind my back for the better part of a year. "We wanted you to be the first to know," Rachel said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she'd perfected over the years, the tone she used when she was lying through her teeth. "Since you helped David pick out the ring, we thought it was only fitting that we announce it here, at your beautiful new home." The room fell silent. Dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on my new hardwood floors. Everyone knew David and I had been together since we met at a mutual friend's birthday party 3.5 years ago. Everyone knew Rachel was supposed to be my maid of honor someday. We talked about it constantly during college, planning our dream weddings like the naive girls we used to be. Everyone in that room knew that what they were witnessing was either the most awkward coincidence in the history of relationships or the most calculated public humiliation they'd ever seen. The air was thick with discomfort as 43 people. I'd counted them earlier when I was playing the perfect hostess, waited for me to break down, to scream, to throw them both out of my own party. They expected tears, maybe some thrown wine glasses, definitely a scene worthy of reality television. But I didn't give them what they expected. Instead, I took a slow sip of my champagne, a bottle of Dom Perignon that David had brought as a housewarming gift, but was apparently actually meant to celebrate his engagement to my best friend. I let the bubbles tickle my throat as I processed what I was seeing, and more importantly, what I was about to reveal. Then I smiled. A real, genuine smile that seemed to confuse everyone in the room, especially Rachel and David. "Congratulations," I said, raising my glass high enough for everyone to see, to new beginnings and to the truth finally coming out. Rachel's triumphant expression flickered with uncertainty for just a moment before she recovered. David looked almost disappointed that I wasn't giving them the dramatic scene they'd clearly been expecting, the breakdown that would justify their betrayal and make them feel better about what they'd done. They had no idea I'd been expecting this exact moment for 6 weeks. They had no idea I'd been planning my own surprise for just as long. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because this story starts long before that night, and it goes deeper than just a cheating boyfriend and a backstabbing best friend. Growing up in Billings, Montana, in a family that ran Mitchell Hardware on Main Street for 3 generations, I learned early that people show you who they are if you just pay attention. My dad, Frank Mitchell, always said, "Trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets, Sarah. But once you know someone's true nature, believe them the first time." My mom, Linda, was the one who taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most because they know exactly where to aim. I'd known Rachel Morrison since freshman year at the University of Colorado in Boulder. We were roommates in Fair and Hall, thrown together by the random assignment system, but we clicked immediately. She was magnetic, charming, the kind of person who could talk her way out of anything and into everything. She had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she was talking to you, like you were part of some exclusive club just by being her friend. But Rachel was also the kind of person who always wanted what someone else had. Always. In college, it started small. When I got accepted into the honors journalism program sophomore year, Rachel suddenly decided she wanted to be a journalist too. She didn't get into the program, but she tried, going so far as to write a letter to the department head explaining why she deserved my spot more than I did. When I started dating Tom Bradley junior year, a sweet guy from my American literature class, Rachel suddenly developed an intense crush on him that lasted exactly as long as our relationship did. She would find excuses to hang out wherever we were, and always touching his arm when she laughed, always finding ways to be alone with him. When Tom and I broke up after 8 months, amicably, over different career goals, Rachel was dating him within 2 weeks. That relationship lasted exactly 3 months, just long enough to prove she could take him from me. When I landed my dream internship at the Denver Post the summer before senior year, Rachel applied to every newspaper in Colorado, claiming she'd suddenly discovered her passion for investigative reporting. She didn't get any of the positions, but she spent that whole summer making comments about how internships were just about who you know, not what you know. When I got my first job after graduation at Pinnacle Marketing, one of Denver's most prestigious marketing firms, Rachel applied to work there 6 months later. She didn't get the job, but she did get hired at a smaller firm across town, where she made sure to mention to anyone who would listen that she'd been overqualified for the position at Pinnacle. I should have seen the pattern forming. I should have recognized that Rachel's friendship came with a price tag, and that price was always whatever I had that she wanted. But I loved her like a sister. We'd been through college together, through breakups and family drama and career struggles. She was my maid of honor when I thought I'd marry Tom. I was hers when she had her brief engagement to Marcus Williams' senior year that lasted all of 6 weeks. That was my first mistake, thinking that history and love could overcome jealousy and competition. My second mistake was trusting her completely when she started getting close to David. David and I met at our mutual friend Jessica's 26th birthday party at a rooftop bar in Reno. He was smart, funny, ambitious, a financial analyst at Wells Fargo with plans to start his own investment firm someday. He was also incredibly handsome in that understated way that gets better the more you look at someone. Dark hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were sharing a secret. We hit it off immediately. He was from California originally, had moved to Denver for work, and like me, he was still figuring out how to build a life in a new city. Our first date was at Ophelia's electric soapbox, and we talked for 4 hours straight about everything from books to travel to our families to our dreams for the future. Rachel was thrilled when I started dating David. She said she'd never seen me so happy, that we were perfect together, that she couldn't wait to be my maid of honor again someday. She went out of her way to be friendly to him, always asking about his work, remembering details about his family, making sure he felt included in our friend group. Looking back, I can see that she was studying him from the beginning, learning his weaknesses, figuring out how to get close to him. But at the time, I just thought I had the best friend in the world. David and I were happy. Really, genuinely happy. We complemented each other perfectly. He was the planner, I was the dreamer. He kept me grounded. I helped him take risks. We moved in together after 18 months into a beautiful apartment in Capitol Hill with exposed brick walls and big windows that overlooked the mountains. We talked about marriage constantly, not in a pressured way, but in that comfortable, assumed way that couples do when they know they've found their person. We'd walk through the neighborhoods we wanted to live in someday, pointing out houses and saying, "That one with the big front porch," or "I love the garden on that one." We'd see older couples at restaurants and joke about how that would be us in 40 years, still holding hands over dinner. About 2 years into our relationship, we started seriously ring shopping. David said he wanted to propose by Christmas, and he wanted to make sure he got exactly what I wanted. We spent 3 weekends visiting different jewelry stores, looking at settings and stones, talking about styles and budgets. I found the perfect ring at a vintage jewelry store in Cherry Creek, a 1920s emerald-cut diamond with small sapphires on either side, set in white gold. It was unique, elegant and somehow felt like it had been waiting for me. "That's the one," I told David as I tried it on, admiring how it looked on my finger. "It's perfect." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "Then that's the one I'll get you. It might take me a few months to save up for it, but it'll be worth the wait." I was so happy I could barely contain myself. I started secretly planning our engagement party, mentally designing our wedding invitations, dreaming about our future together. That was 3 months before everything fell apart. The first crack in my perfect life appeared on a Tuesday evening in early September, 8 weeks before the housewarming party that would change everything. I was working late at Pinnacle, trying to finish a comprehensive marketing campaign for one of our biggest clients, a tech startup that was preparing for a major product launch. The campaign was my baby. I'd been developing it for months, and if it succeeded, it would likely mean a promotion and a significant raise. David had been understanding about my long hours, even encouraging. "Work hard now," he'd say, "so we can afford that house in Highlands you've been eyeing." He'd bring me dinner at the office sometimes, or pick me up so I wouldn't have to take the bus home late at night. That Tuesday, I decided to surprise him. I finished up around 8 p.m., picked up Thai food from his favorite restaurant on Colfax, and drove to our apartment in Capitol Hill. I was excited to spend some time together, maybe watch a movie, talk about our weekend plans. I used my key like I always did. The apartment was mostly dark, but I could see light coming from the bedroom and hear voices. Not just David's voice. 2 people talking and laughing. My first thought was that maybe his brother was visiting from San Francisco, or one of his coworkers had stopped by. I set the food down on the kitchen counter and walked quietly down the hallway, not wanting to interrupt if it was a work call or something important. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside without being seen. What I saw made my blood turn to ice in my veins. David was lying on the bed in just his boxer shorts, his work clothes scattered on the floor. Rachel was sitting cross-legged beside him, wearing one of my old CU t-shirts that she must have borrowed and never returned. She was painting his nails black, something David had never done in the 3 years I'd known him, and they were both laughing about something. But it wasn't just what they were doing. It was the intimacy of it, the casual way she was touching him, the way he was looking at her, the comfortable silence between their laughter. This wasn't a new thing. This was practiced, familiar, routine. "She'll never suspect," Rachel was saying, carefully applying polish to his thumb. "Sarah thinks everyone is as honest as she is. It's actually kind of sad how trusting she is." "She bought the ring story completely," David replied, examining his other hand. 3 months of me ring shopping, and she never once questioned why I was always too busy to actually buy anything. She just keeps talking about that vintage ring like it's already hers. Rachel laughed, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times but had never heard directed at me before. It was cruel, dismissive. The look on her face when we announce it at her party is going to be priceless. She's been planning this housewarming for months, talking about it nonstop. All her work friends, her family flying in from Montana. Maximum humiliation in front of everyone who matters to her. "Are you sure she won't suspect anything before then?" David asked, sounding almost worried. "Please," Rachel scoffed. "This is Sarah we're talking about. She still thinks I'm her best friend. She probably still thinks you're going to propose at Christmas. She's completely clueless. What about after? When we announce the engagement? She'll be too broken to fight back. She never fights back. Remember when Tom chose me over her? She just accepted it and moved on. Remember when she didn't get that promotion last year that went to Brandon instead? She didn't even argue with her boss. Sarah's a pushover. She'll probably congratulate us and then go cry in her room like she always does." I backed away from the door carefully, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it through the walls. I made it to the kitchen and stood there for a moment, staring at the bags of food I'd brought. The smell of pad thai that usually made my mouth water now made me feel like I was going to vomit. I looked around the apartment that I'd helped decorate, at the photos of us on the bookshelf, at the coffee mug David had given me for my birthday that said, "World's best girlfriend." Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. I left without saying a word. I left the food on the counter like a calling card. Let them figure out how it got there. The drive back to my own apartment was a blur of tears and rage and disbelief. I kept expecting to wake up, to realize this was all some horrible nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and work stress. But every red light, every street corner, every familiar landmark confirmed that this was real. When I got to my place, a small one-bedroom in Baker that I'd been renting while David and I lived together, planning to give it up when we got engaged, I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to process what I just learned. It wasn't just that David was cheating on me. It wasn't just that Rachel, my best friend since college, was betraying me in the worst possible way. It was the casual cruelty of their conversation, the way they talked about me like I was some pathetic character in their love story, someone whose feelings didn't matter, someone who existed only to be deceived and humiliated. They thought they knew me. They thought I was weak, passive, someone who would roll over and take it. When they destroyed my life in front of everyone I cared about. That was their biggest mistake. I called in sick the next day and spent it thinking. Not crying. I was done crying. Planning. By evening, I had the beginning of an idea. I started with David's phone. He always left it lying around when he was at my place, never bothered with a passcode because we have nothing to hide from each other. I'd never looked through it before. I'd trusted him completely. But trust, as my father always said, could be lost in buckets. It took me 3 weeks of careful investigation to find what I was looking for. David was smart about covering his tracks, but not smart enough. The messages were there, buried in a group chat with Rachel and 2 other people I didn't recognize. A guy named Marcus, Rachel's ex-fiancé from college, and a woman named Jennifer, who apparently worked with Rachel. The chat was called Operation Housewarming. Reading through months of messages was like watching a movie about my own life, except I was cast as the villain in their story. They'd been planning this moment for months, not just the engagement announcement, but something much bigger and more devastating. David had been systematically feeding Rachel information about my work, my clients, my projects, details about campaigns I was developing, strategies I was planning, even confidential client information that I'd shared with him in casual conversation. Rachel had been using this information to position herself for a job at my company, specifically my job. But it got worse. Rachel had been using the inside information David provided to sabotage my work. 3 major clients I'd lost in the past 6 months, accounts that had suddenly and mysteriously decided to go with other marketing firms, had been poisoned against me by carefully placed rumors about my professionalism and competence. Rumors that could only have come from someone who knew intimate details about my work process and client relationships. Sarah's been struggling with the Morrison account, read one message from David to the group. She missed 2 deadlines last month and had to redo the entire creative brief. I think the client is getting frustrated. None of that was true. I'd never missed a deadline on the Morrison account, and the creative brief had been approved on the first try. But somehow, 2 weeks later, Morrison had called my boss to complain about my unreliability and had moved their account to Rachel's firm. The Henderson project is giving Sarah trouble too, read another message. She's been stressed about it for weeks, staying late every night trying to fix problems with the campaign. Again, completely false. The Henderson project had been one of my smoothest campaigns all year. But Henderson had also mysteriously decided to switch firms, citing concerns about my attention to detail. But the worst part was reading their discussions about me personally. How naive I was, how easy I was to manipulate, how I'd probably just roll over and take it when they destroyed my life. They had names for me: Little Miss Perfect, the pushover, Daddy's Girl. Sarah actually thinks David is going to propose at Christmas, Rachel had written. She's been dropping hints about engagement parties and wedding venues. It's pathetic. She helped me pick out the ring I'm going to give you, David had replied. Spent 3 weekends shopping with me like the good little helper she is. She has no idea she was planning her own humiliation. I almost feel bad, Jennifer had written. She seems really nice. Nice doesn't get you anywhere in this world, Rachel had replied. Sarah's had everything handed to her, Good family, good grades, good job, good boyfriend. It's time someone took her down a peg. The anger that had been simmering since that night I discovered them together crystallized into something sharper, more focused, something with purpose. I started documenting everything: screenshots, dates, times. I created a folder on my laptop called House Records. Innocent enough if anyone saw it, since I was in the middle of buying my new house. Inside that folder, I built my case methodically, like the marketing campaign it essentially was. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Patricia Williams, and she came highly recommended by a lawyer friend of mine. Patricia looked like someone's favorite aunt. Gray-haired, kind eyes, the type of person you'd trust with your secrets without thinking twice, which made her perfect for what I needed. I need to know everything, I told her at our first meeting at a coffee shop in Lodo, sliding a folder across the table containing everything I'd discovered so far. I need to know what they're doing when they think I'm not watching. I need to know how deep this goes, and I need evidence that will hold up if this gets legal. Patricia looked through the folder, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Honey," she said finally, "this isn't just cheating. This is fraud, potentially criminal conspiracy. You're not just looking at a broken heart here. You're looking at a coordinated effort to destroy your career and steal your livelihood." "I know," I said. "That's why I need your help." "It's going to take some time," she warned, "and it's not going to be cheap." "I have time," I replied, "and money isn't an issue." It took Patricia 3 weeks to uncover the full scope of what David and Rachel had been doing to me, and when she delivered her report, it was worse than I'd imagined. David hadn't just been cheating with Rachel and feeding her information about my work. He'd been systematically stealing from me for months. Small amounts from our joint vacation account, money I'd been saving for our future together. Money that was now funding their secret apartment together, a place in Cherry Creek where they'd been meeting twice a week for the past 8 months. But the real bombshell was what Patricia had discovered about Rachel's job situation. She hadn't just applied to my company as a potential employee. She'd been actively working to get me fired so she could take my position. "She's been building a case against you for months," Patricia explained, showing me a folder thick with evidence. "She's been positioning herself as your replacement, with your boss, your clients, even some of your colleagues. She's been systematically undermining your reputation while building herself up as the obvious choice to take over your accounts." The evidence was overwhelming. Emails between Rachel and my boss that she'd somehow obtained. Client contact information that she shouldn't have had. Detailed knowledge of my current projects that could only have come from someone with inside access to my work. "How did she get all this information?" I asked. "Your boyfriend has been photographing your work documents," Patricia said, showing me a series of photos taken with David's phone. Contract details, client lists, project timelines, budget information. He's been feeding it all to Rachel. I stared at the evidence spread across the table. Bank statements showing David's systematic theft from our joint accounts. Email chains showing Rachel's campaign to undermine me at work. Photos of them together at restaurants I'd never been to. Looking at apartments I'd never seen. Planning a future built on the destruction of mine. "There's more," Patricia said quietly. "I found evidence that Rachel has been in contact with 3 of your major clients, offering to take over their accounts personally at a reduced rate if they're willing to leave your firm." "That's," I started, then stopped. I didn't even have words for what that was. "It's corporate espionage," Patricia said. "It's theft of trade secrets, and depending on how your employment contract is written, it might be criminal conspiracy." That night, I sat in my apartment with all the evidence laid out in front of me, and I made several decisions. First, I was going to let them go through with their plan to humiliate me at my housewarming party. Second, I was going to turn their moment of triumph into their worst nightmare. And third, I was going to make sure they faced consequences for what they'd done that went far beyond just losing me as a girlfriend and friend. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. I made copies of everything. I organized the evidence into a presentation that would be clear and compelling to an audience of my friends, family, and colleagues. And I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Jake Martinez, an investigative reporter at the Denver Post who'd been trying to get me to go out with him since college. Sarah? Jake sounded surprised when I called. It's been forever. How are you? I'm good, I said, but I have a story for you. Is it a really good story about corporate sabotage, fraud, and conspiracy? Are you interested? I'm always interested in a good story, Jake replied, especially one involving corporate fraud. When do you want to meet? How about you come to my housewarming party this Saturday? I suggested. Bring a notebook. You're going to want to take notes. The hardest part of those 3 weeks was pretending everything was normal. I had to smile when Rachel asked if she could bring a date to the party. Someone special, she said with that fake, mysterious smile. I had to laugh when David complained about work stress while he was literally stealing my money and photographing my confidential work documents. I had to act excited about our future together while planning to expose his betrayal in front of everyone we knew. But I used the time well. I prepared my presentation with the same attention to detail I brought to my most important marketing campaigns. I researched the legal implications of what they'd done. I consulted with a lawyer about my options, and I planned every detail of how I wanted that night to go. I also used the time to protect myself and my career. I quietly documented every client interaction, every project detail, every conversation with colleagues. I made copies of all my work files and stored them safely. I even started casually mentioning to my boss and key clients that I'd heard rumors about competitors trying to steal proprietary information, planting seeds that would make sense once the truth came out. The night before the party, I barely slept. Not from nerves. I felt strangely calm about what was going to happen, but from anticipation. For weeks, I'd been playing the role of the oblivious girlfriend and trusting best friend, and I was ready to stop pretending. The night of the party, everything was perfect. My new house in the Highlands looked magazine-ready. I'd spent weeks planning every detail. The catering from Root Down, the flower arrangements from Bloom and Vine, the playlist that included all our favorite songs from college. The bar was fully stocked, the lighting was warm and inviting, and the October weather had cooperated with a beautiful, clear evening that was perfect for the outdoor space. All my colleagues from Pinnacle were there, including my boss, Richard Peterson. My parents had flown in from Montana and were charming everyone with stories about small-town life and the hardware business. My college friends had driven down from Boulder. Even some of David's coworkers had come, including his boss from Wells Fargo. Rachel arrived fashionably late, wearing a stunning black dress that I recognized as the one she'd bought for her interview at my company. The interview I now knew had been part of her plan to replace me. She brought a bottle of expensive champagne, Krug Grand Cuvée, kissing my cheek as she handed it to me. For the hostess, she said, her smile bright and fake. Tonight's going to be so special. I can just feel it. She moved through the party like she owned it, charming my parents, laughing with my colleagues, playing the role of the perfect best friend. Watching her work the room, knowing what I knew, was almost surreal. David arrived an hour later, looking nervous and distracted. He kept checking his phone and looking around the room. When he spotted Rachel, they exchanged a look that they probably thought was subtle, but was obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. Jake Martinez arrived around 7:30, looking casual but professional in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. I introduced him to people as my friend from college who worked at the Denver Post. Surprise, not mentioning that he was there in a professional capacity. At 8 o'clock sharp, Rachel tapped her champagne glass with a fork. The gesture was theatrical, practiced. She'd clearly been planning this moment down to the smallest detail. The room quieted down and I felt my heart start to race. This was it. The moment they'd been building toward for months. I have an announcement, she said, her voice carrying that theatrical quality she'd always used when she wanted to be the center of attention. David and I have something very special to share with all of you. She reached for his hand, and he stepped forward, looking around the room at all the faces watching them. I could see my parents exchanging confused looks across the room. My work colleagues were staring at me, waiting for my reaction. David produced a small velvet box from his pocket. The same box I'd helped him pick out 3 months ago when I thought it was for me. "We're engaged!" Rachel squealed, and David slipped the ring onto her finger with a flourish. It was my ring. The vintage emerald-cut diamond with sapphires that I'd fallen in love with at the jewelry store in Cherry Creek. The ring I dreamed about wearing. The ring that was supposed to symbolize David's love for me. The room erupted in gasps and uncomfortable murmurs. I could see people looking from Rachel to David to me, trying to process what they were witnessing. My mother's face had gone white. My father looked like he wanted to punch someone. I smiled and started clapping slowly, deliberately. "Congratulations!" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What wonderful news!" Rachel looked almost disappointed by my reaction, but she recovered quickly, launching into what was clearly a prepared speech. "We wanted to announce it here because Sarah's been such a good friend to both of us. She even helped David pick out the ring. We couldn't have done this without her support." More uncomfortable silence. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to break down, to scream, to do something that would make sense of this impossible situation. "Actually," I said, walking over to where my laptop was set up, connected to the large TV screen I'd mounted on the wall for the party, "since we're sharing wonderful news, I have something to share too." I clicked open a PowerPoint presentation I'd spent weeks preparing. The first slide appeared on the screen in large, clear letters. Operation Housewarming, the real story behind tonight's announcement. The color drained from David's face instantly. Rachel's mouth fell open, her triumphant smile disappearing as if someone had flipped a switch. "See, I know all about Operation Housewarming," I continued, my voice steady and clear, projecting to the back of the room. "It's the name of the group chat where you've been planning this moment for the past 8 months. Click. The next slide showed a screenshot of their group chat, blown up large enough for everyone in the room to read clearly. "The look on her face when we announce it at her party is going to be priceless," I read aloud from one of Rachel's messages. "She's been planning this housewarming for months, talking about it nonstop. All her work friends, her family flying in from Montana. Maximum humiliation in front of everyone who matters to her." The room was dead silent now. I could see people pulling out their phones, some of them taking pictures of the screen, others probably texting friends about what they were witnessing. "She'll be too broken to fight back," I continued, reading from another message. "She never fights back. Sarah's a pushover. She'll probably congratulate us and then go cry in her room like she always does." I paused, looking around the room at all the shocked faces, then directly at Rachel and David. "Well, you got the congratulations part right. But here's the thing about Operation Housewarming," I continued, clicking to the next slide. "It wasn't just about stealing my boyfriend and humiliating me at my own party. It was about stealing my entire life." The next slide showed bank statements, highlighted to show the systematic withdrawals David had been making from our joint accounts. David's been stealing money from our joint savings account, money I've been putting away for our future together, to fund the secret apartment you two have been sharing in Cherry Creek. I clicked to the next slide, which showed photos Patricia had taken of David and Rachel entering and leaving the apartment building. 1247 Madison Street, Unit 304. You've been meeting there twice a week for the past 8 months. The rent is $2,800 a month, paid for with money stolen from me. David tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "Oh, I'm not finished. Not even close." The next series of slides showed the evidence of Rachel's campaign to sabotage my career. Email chains, client contact lists, internal company documents that she shouldn't have had access to. "Rachel, you've been systematically sabotaging my client relationships and positioning yourself to take my job," I explained, walking through the evidence methodically. "The Morrison account that mysteriously left our firm last month? Here's the email where you offered to take over their marketing at a 20% discount if they were willing to cite reliability concerns as their reason for leaving." I looked directly at my boss, Richard Peterson, who was staring at the screen with his mouth open. "Richard, you should know that 3 of the clients we lost this quarter, Morrison, Henderson, and Blackstone Tech, were all approached by Rachel with inside information about their contracts and our pricing structures. How did she get that information?" Richard asked, his voice tight with anger. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a series of photos taken with David's phone. Photos of my work documents spread out on our kitchen table, my laptop screen showing client files, even handwritten notes from meetings. David's been photographing my work documents and feeding the information to Rachel. Contract details, client lists, project timelines, budget information, confidential strategic plans. He's been systematically stealing trade secrets and giving them to his girlfriend so she could use them to destroy my career. The room exploded into chaos. People were talking over each other. Phones were ringing, and I could hear someone, I think it was my father, using language I'd never heard him use before. But I wasn't finished. "Rachel," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "you've also been in contact with 4 of my current clients, offering to take over their accounts if they leave Pinnacle. Here are the emails." The next slide showed detailed email chains between Rachel and my clients, offering them reduced rates and making vague promises about better service and more personalized attention. "And David," I continued, turning to face him directly, "about that ring you're so proud of, the one Rachel's wearing right now, you bought it with money you stole from me. So technically, Rachel, you're wearing a ring that I paid for to celebrate your engagement to my boyfriend, announced at a party in the house I bought with money I earned at the job you tried to steal from me." That's when David completely lost it. He started moving toward me, his face red with rage, shouting that I was lying, that I'd fabricated everything, that I was a psychotic bitch who couldn't handle being dumped. But before he could get close to me, 2 things happened. First, my father, all 6 feet 4 inches of him, stepped between David and me with a look that could have melted steel. Second, Jake Martinez stood up from where he'd been sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes. "Actually," Jake said, his voice calm and professional, "I'm Jake Martinez from the Denver Post, and I've been documenting everything Ms. Mitchell just presented. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the allegations of corporate espionage and embezzlement." That's when Rachel started screaming. Not talking, not arguing, screaming, shrieking that I was a liar, that I'd hacked their phones, that I was trying to ruin their lives out of jealousy. "You can't prove any of this," she yelled, pointing at the screen where the evidence was still displayed. "You probably made all of this up." "Actually," said a new voice from the back of the room, "she can prove it. All of it." Everyone turned to see Patricia Williams walking through the crowd, carrying a leather briefcase and looking every bit the professional investigator she was, despite her grandmotherly appearance. "I'm Patricia Williams, licensed private investigator," she announced, opening her briefcase and pulling out several thick folders. "I've been documenting Mr. Gray, Chen, and Miss Morrison's activities for the past 3 weeks at Miss Mitchell's request. Everything you just saw is backed up by surveillance photos, financial records, phone records, and sworn affidavits." She handed one of the folders to Jake Martinez. The original documents are already in the hands of the Denver Police Department's white-collar crime unit, as well as the SEC's Fraud Investigation Division. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on my hardwood floors. Then David made his second huge mistake of the evening. Instead of shutting up and calling a lawyer, he decided to double down. "This is all bullshit," he shouted, his face now bright red. "You can't prove I stole anything. That money was from our joint account. I had every right to use it." "Actually," Patricia said calmly, pulling out another folder, "you withdrew money from accounts that Ms. Mitchell wasn't aware existed. Accounts that you opened using her social security number and forged signatures. That's not just theft, Mr. Chen. That's identity theft and bank fraud." I watched David's face cycle through several emotions: anger, fear, disbelief, and finally what looked like panic. "You can't. I never, Sarah, you know I would never." "David," I said quietly, "I know exactly what you would do, because you did it." Rachel, meanwhile, was standing frozen in place, still wearing my ring contact, staring at the presentation on the screen like she couldn't quite process what was happening. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," she whispered, almost to herself. "You were supposed to cry. You were supposed to break down. You never fight back." "You're right," I said, looking directly at her. "I never used to fight back. But you made one crucial mistake, Rachel. You underestimated me." That's when my boss, Richard Peterson, stepped forward. His face was grim, and I could see the wheels turning in his head as he processed the implications of what he'd just learned. "Sarah," he said, "I need to speak with you privately. And Ms. Morrison," he turned to Rachel, "you're no longer welcome on Pinnacle property. If you come anywhere near our offices or our clients, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "You can't do that," Rachel protested. "I don't even work for you." "No," Richard said coldly, "but you've been illegally soliciting our clients using stolen proprietary information. That's corporate espionage, and I can absolutely ban you from our premises." Jake Martinez was scribbling notes furiously, occasionally asking clarifying questions. I could see him getting excited about the story. This wasn't just personal drama. This was a legitimate business scandal with criminal implications. "Miss Mitchell," Jake said, "would you be willing to go on the record about this? The Denver Post would be very interested in running a story about corporate espionage and fraud in the local marketing industry." Before I could answer, David made his third and final mistake of the evening. He lunged toward my laptop, trying to grab it and delete the presentation. My father, who had been standing quietly beside me throughout this entire exchange, moved faster than I'd seen him move since his high school football days. He caught David's arm and twisted it behind his back with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 40 years dealing with difficult customers and the occasional shoplifter. "Son," my father said in that deceptively calm voice he used when he was really, truly angry, "I suggest you stop making this worse for yourself." "Let go of me," David yelled, struggling against my father's grip. "This is assault." "This is citizen's arrest," my father replied. "You just attempted to destroy evidence in front of 40 witnesses, including a police officer." I looked around and realized he was right. Detective Martinez, no relation to Jake, who lived in the neighborhood and had come to the party as a friend, was indeed standing near the back of the room, watching everything unfold with professional interest. "Actually," Detective Martinez said, stepping forward and pulling out his badge, "I think we need to have a conversation down at the station. All of us." The next hour was a blur of police cars, statements, and phone calls. David and Rachel were both arrested. David for theft, identity fraud, and attempted destruction of evidence. Rachel for corporate espionage and conspiracy. The ring was taken as evidence since it had been purchased with stolen money. My parents stayed with me while I gave my statement to the police. And Jake Martinez waited patiently for his turn to interview me for his story. Most party guests had left by then, but a few close friends remained to help clean up and make sure I was okay. "Honey," my mother said, wrapping her arms around me as we watched the police cars drive away, "I am so proud of how you handled this. Your father and I raised you to be strong, but what you did tonight, that took real courage. It also took real planning." My father added with a proud smile, "You executed that better than any marketing campaign I've ever seen. Your grandfather would have been impressed." The story broke in the Denver Post 3 days later. Jake's article, titled "Local Marketing Executive Exposes Elaborate Corporate Fraud Scheme," ran on the front page of the business section and was picked up by several national outlets. The article detailed not just the personal betrayal, but the larger implications for corporate security and the protection of trade secrets. Within a week, I was contacted by 3 other marketing professionals who had experienced similar situations with Rachel. She'd apparently made a habit of befriending employees at competing firms and trying to steal their clients and trade secrets. The pattern went back years, and with my case providing the initial evidence, prosecutors were able to build a much larger case against her. David pled guilty to identity theft and embezzlement 2 months later, and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison plus restitution. His investment firm dreams were over. No financial institution would ever hire him again, with a felony fraud conviction on his record. Rachel fought the charges initially, claiming she was just an ambitious entrepreneur trying to build her own business. But when faced with the mountain of evidence Patricia and I had compiled, plus testimony from her other victims, she eventually pled guilty to corporate espionage and conspiracy. She got 2 years in state prison and was banned from working in marketing or public relations in Colorado for 10 years. The house I'd bought with money I'd earned through my own hard work became truly mine. The ring I'd loved was eventually returned to me after the legal proceedings concluded, though I ended up selling it and donating the money to a nonprofit that helps victims of financial fraud. But the best part of the whole ordeal was what happened to my career. Richard Peterson promoted me to senior account executive within a month of the scandal breaking. The publicity from the case, while initially embarrassing for the firm, ultimately demonstrated our commitment to protecting client confidentiality and trade secrets. Several new clients signed with us specifically because they were impressed by how we'd handled the situation. You showed loyalty, intelligence, and integrity under impossible circumstances, Richard told me during my promotion review. Those are exactly the qualities we want in our leadership team. 6 months later, I was offered a partnership track position and a significant equity stake in the company. But even better than the professional success was the personal growth that came from finally standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I'd fought back against people who were trying to hurt me, and I'd won. Not just won, I'd completely turned the tables on them. The confidence that came from that experience changed everything about how I approached relationships, work, and life in general. I stopped being the person who never fought back and became someone who stood up for herself and others. Which brings me to today, 18 months after that night that changed everything. I'm sitting in my office at Pinnacle Marketing, the corner office that comes with my new position as partner and head of strategic development. Outside my window, I can see the mountains that first drew me to Colorado all those years ago. On my desk is a photo of my parents at my promotion party, both of them beaming with pride. My phone buzzes with a text from Jake Martinez. We've been dating for 8 months now. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. We're thing like David, where David was charming but calculating, Jake is authentic. Where David made promises he never intended to keep, Jake follows through on everything he says. Where David betrayed my trust, Jake has earned it one day at a time. Dinner tonight? That new place in Lohi? His text reads. I text back, perfect. See you at 7. I have some good news to share. The good news is that this morning I signed the biggest client in Pinnacle's history, a tech startup that's about to go public and needs a complete rebranding and marketing strategy. It's a 2-year contract worth more than $3 million, and it came to us specifically because the CEO had read about how we'd handled the corporate espionage case. We want to work with people who have integrity, he'd said during our final presentation. What you did took guts, and that's exactly the kind of backbone we want representing our company. Rachel and David sometimes, but not with anger anymore. David got out of prison 6 months ago and moved back to California, where his parents helped him find a job at his uncle's small accounting firm. He'll never work in investment again. It was rare, but he's apparently trying to rebuild his life. Rachel served 14 months and was released last spring. I heard through mutual friends that she moved to Phoenix and is working as a waitress while trying to figure out what to do next. Her marketing career is over, at least in Colorado, and her reputation in the industry ensures that she'll never work in corporate marketing again. Part of me feels bad for them sometimes. They destroyed their own lives trying to destroy mine, and in the end, they lost everything while I gained more than I'd ever imagined possible. But then I remember sitting in that coffee shop with Patricia, looking at evidence of how systematically they'd planned to humiliate and destroy me, and the sympathy fades. They made their choices. They chose to betray, to steal, to conspire, to hurt someone who had loved and trusted them. They chose to build their happiness on the foundation of my destruction. I chose to fight back. I have a small garden behind my house now, where I grow vegetables and herbs. Last spring, I planted tomatoes, peppers, basil, and rosemary, things that take time and patience to grow but reward you with something nourishing and beautiful. This morning, as I was watering the plants before work, I thought about how much my life has changed since that night 18 months ago. I'm stronger now, more confident, more aware of my own worth. I've learned that trust is precious and should be given carefully, but I've also learned that not everyone is like Rachel and David. Most people are good, honest, and worthy of trust. I've learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who values herself enough to demand better treatment. I've learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the catalyst for the best thing that happens to you. And I've learned that sometimes when people show you who they really are, the best thing you can do is believe them, gather your evidence, and then show them exactly who you really are in return. Tonight, over dinner with Jake, I'm going to tell him about the new client, about the promotion I'm being considered for that would make me the youngest partner in Pinnacle's history, and about the house I'm thinking of buying in Cherry Creek, ironically, just a few blocks from the apartment where Rachel and David used to meet. I'm also going to tell him that I love him, because I do, and because I've learned that life is too short to wait for the perfect moment to say the things that matter. 3 years ago, I thought I had my life all figured out. I was going to marry David, start a family, build a quiet, comfortable life with someone I thought I could trust completely. That life was built on lies, but I didn't know it at the time. The life I'm building now is built on truth, about who I am, what I want, and what I deserve. It's built on genuine relationships with people who see my worth and celebrate my successes instead of trying to steal them. It's built on work that challenges me and values my contributions. It's built on self-respect and the knowledge that I'm strong enough to fight for what's mine. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well and refusing to let other people's toxicity poison your garden. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for reading. Writing this all out has been cathartic in ways I didn't expect. If you're dealing with betrayal, fraud, or toxic relationships, I want you to know that you're stronger than you think you are. You deserve better than people who treat you like a supporting character in their story. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Stand up for yourself. And remember, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is just the prologue to the best thing that's coming. Have you ever had a moment that felt like the end of the world, but turned out to be the beginning of something amazing? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story helped you feel less alone or gave you courage to stand up for yourself, please share it. We're all stronger when we support each other. If this story resonated with you, please give it an upvote. It really means a lot to know that sharing these difficult experiences can help other people feel empowered to fight for themselves. Until next time, keep growing, keep fighting, and never let anyone convince you that you're not worth fighting for. Update. A lot of people have been asking in the comments what happened to the money David stole. Through the restitution process, I got back every penny he took, plus interest and legal fees. I used part of it to take my parents on a trip to Europe, something they dreamed of doing but never felt they could afford. The rest went into a down payment on my dream house. Someone also asked about Jake and whether I'm worried about trusting someone new after what happened. It's definitely something I think about, but Jake has been incredibly patient and understanding about my need to take things slowly. He's also been completely transparent about his life, his finances, his work, and his relationships in a way that David never was. Trust is something that's earned over time, and Jake is earning it every day. Finally, to everyone who shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery in the comments, you are all incredibly brave, and I'm honored that my story inspired you to share yours. We're stronger together, and seeing how many of us have faced similar challenges and come out stronger gives me hope for everyone who's still fighting their way through. Thank you for reading, for sharing, and for being part of this community. You're all amazing.